I really should have just welded this back on. I've spent the last couple of hours, which I've saved you the torture of, trying to figure out how I'm actually going to put that thing back on the vehicle so that it stays there. It's been a bit of a nightmare. I've gone through my original idea, which got thrown out, 3 or 4 other ideas, then till I think I've figured something out that's going to work. So down in there, I made a tiny little bracket, which you can see right there with the screw going through it. So I made that up, got it all buzzed in. I welded a plate to the back side of these fins and then just drilled a hole through both of them and stuck the screw through. Now it's not perfect. I think I may end up having to come along behind here and weld in a strip along it to kind of create a finished look on the back side of that. That will probably be necessary. Since that bracket I made here seemed to work, I went ahead and made 5 more. I'm thinking 6 across the front of this thing ought to do it. Something like another one there. 1 in behind that. But then basically the same thing all the way down. So we'll just have these screws along the backside. And then I'm also, this is the original Tahoe hinge in the factory place. That's going to get moved. I will build some sort of support structure right here to hold the front end up at whatever height the front end needs to be at to get that all lined up correctly. So let's take a look at one of these and see if this idea is going to continue working the way it has. The legs are probably a little bit long. I tried to cut them just a bit long so I could grind them into shape. That one seems like it might be just about perfect. Hopefully that is just going to do the trick to get this thing all mounted in place and nice and secure and hopefully strong enough to do what it needs to do. As you can see, I just tacked a little sheet on behind this. I'll weld this a little more firmly now that I know I'm moving forward with this idea. But all I'm going to do is tack a sheet across the grills where I need it. And then I'm just going to drill 2 holes and then sort of countersink them for these 2. Alright, we've got all the support tangs tacked in place. And I've got plates and countersunk screw holes on the cowl. De-rusted the cowl a little bit. I'm going to paint it with some rust reformer before it actually goes in for the last time. But we are now ready to put this thing back on and start drilling some holes so we can try and mount it and see how it's going to work out. Unfortunately, I don't currently have any countersunk hardware, so I'm just using some ugly sheet metal hex head things to put this together. Ground each edge flush and then just sort of ground some off the top. There's a couple places where my welds weren't deep enough and I ground through, But the reality is, it's not actually a very smooth edge. Right here, there's a big old divot. So my plan is actually to go back and continue filling and adding to this. And I just need to build it up until I can carve a nice smooth edge. And I'm going to build it up the way you've just seen. Row of welds, grind flat, round off. Maybe grab some wire and just weld a bead of wire along it to build that edge up a little bit. I just want to try and build it up till it's nice and clean and smooth and we get a halfway decent fitment out of it. I've just got this lip all the way across. Kind of helps strengthen that back end, and maybe I feel like it gives it a bit more finished look, but the reality is that it's not really going to do much in the way of finished look, I mean, because something I've realized, it was there before, but I just didn't really pay a lot of attention to how bad it was. The fitment back in here gets pretty bad. I'm actually having a really hard time showing you guys how big, but it's over, like well over 1/8 of an inch for a lot of it. In the middle it looks pretty good, but attempts I've made to close it up just made it worse, so I've got to go back and fix all of that. So what I'm working on now, I've finished one side over here, is I've welded in an entire section and then just slowly ground it back. And I have pretty tight clearances. There is clearance there, and if I need to add a little more. But overall, I just thought that made it look much more finished, much, much better. At this point, I've cut myself this piece that will fit right there. So I'm going to get that welded in, and then, 90% of that's going to get cut back off and ground down to make it all fit how I want it to fit. But that is my next step. Panel's all welded in, good to go. I've just tacked it all the way along. You can see I've marked this line here that I'm going to cut it off at, so it'll be cut off. And then I will just be slowly grinding it away with this air grinder until I get the fit I want. So I've been out here getting my butt kicked by this cowl. It is just much harder than I expected it to be. I realized I had the mounting plates built into the cowl completely in the wrong place, so I ended up just cutting those off. Because the big screws that I'm using right now, they don't actually need that plate to bolt the cowl in place, and this lets me slide it as far as I want. So anyway, I got both sides of the cowl at the same height, and I just cut these little legs. I'm actually going to probably weld the legs to the cowl. Otherwise, what I may do is like weld a nut down in here, put a hole up here, and use just a big long bolt to push through and grab so that it just kind of supports this front end. Then the other thing I decided I'm going to do is add a bar all the way across that curve. So I have this, half 5/8 square stock. It's actually pieces of an old handrail, and I welded two pieces together because I don't have anything long enough. So we're going to go ahead and try and get this curve that we need into this piece so that we can start getting that fitted. Okay, so we've got a halfway decent fit on that bar across the cowl here. Clamp it as I go to put it all together. I'm going to put this bar up underneath to reinforce across that. I really don't know that I'm going to move forward with that hinge design, so I may remove that and put the bar all the way across over there because that comes in like right under here. Maybe what I'll do here though is bring it out to this edge and then put in a little 45 piece that ties to that leg. Then when I bolt it all down, that'll create some strength and rigidity in it of some kind, hopefully. I don't know how much it really needs, but I also don't want it just flopping around. Hey guys, so here we are a couple of days later. I've just been working on this cowl a ton, but basically I had to do almost everything twice. I just did a terrible job of fitting it to the windshield and everything the first time, so ended up getting my bolt points all in the wrong places. So I had to completely redo the tabs on the cowl to get those bolt points in place. But regardless, it's there now. So, that is the back side of the finished cowl. I painted it all up just with some rust converter. You can see I welded on these legs. I've welded on that bar that I was just previously talking about. Redid these, so they're in the better places now. You can see, did a little touch up there. That still needs a bit of grinding. Got some touch up down on the bottom to do with the grinder as well. But otherwise, all of this is basically finished. So I'll get that thrown in place real quick, and I'll show you guys the final fit that I ended up achieving with this thing. So I've got a fairly decent gap all the way down. It's not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with it overall. And this, you know, it's nice and strong out here in the edges. It does have a little bit of flex in the middle, but I'm gonna leave it like this for now. And hopefully that will be good enough for everything just to be strong enough to support the hood and everything else that it needs to do. With the cowl all fitted in place now, we're going to move on to making the fenders mount. Catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.